Good afternoon. Thank you all very much for turning up for this presentation. My name is Eamonn Burgess. I live just down the street in Normandy Tower, and from 1979 to 1985 I lived in the Argyle Street Squat. Does anyone actually know about the Argyle Street Squat? Excellent. We've got two people here that did you hear of it, or did you come down to visit it?
I just heard about it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It was the kind of place where parents would say to their children, if you don't do your lessons, you will end up in Argyle Street. It was notorious, it was infamous, but it was also 5 years of absolute heaven and hell all at the same time. And I want to do a presentation about it for about 45 minutes at the most. And I'll talk for 5 minutes, then take any questions and answers, because I won't make a lot of sense. And then I'm going to play a song. Then I'll talk for another 5 minutes, take more questions and answers if you're still here, and then play another song, and then talk for 5 minutes, take more questions and answers, and sing a final song with Chrysalis. Chrysalis used to live in Argyle Street as well, and now runs the Argyle Street Squat Facebook page. And one of the things that I notice on the Facebook page is that we do have very different perspectives of how we all lived together. We did all live together in a more communal sense than most of us do in society. And the way in which we disagree about basically how we got hold of 60 houses in one street, lived in them for 5 years and lost them. So those are the three sections that I'm going to run through. Back in 1979, Norwich City Council had the best housing stock in Norwich. Over 50% of this city's population was living in a council tenancy at the time. And something to remember later on is that in 1979, when the legislation was brought in to compulsorily make councils sell their council houses to council tenants, Norwich City Council, as a Labour council, was chosen by the Labour Party to take the Conservative government to the House of Lords to try and stop that from happening. Now, that comes up later in the story. I lived in a 3-bedroom house with 5 other people, and we were very overcrowded. There was something called the Freewheel Community Bookshop, which was originally located at the end of King Street in what is now an empty shop, but was an estate agent's up until very recently. Yep.
Freewheel Bookshop wasn't actually there, it was down St Benedict Street.
I think it moved there.
It moved there later.
Yeah, exactly.
In about 1984.
Yeah.
So, there you are. There were 2 incarnations of that bookshop.
Exactly, yep. Originally, it was, as I remember, in Rose Lane? Or did it move there second?
It started out in 56
It did.
Benedict.
And Freewheel Community Bookshop held 3 meetings in the St Benedict Street one. This is how bad my history is. In the St Benedict Street, when we had these meetings upstairs in what is no longer there as a building, but is now a glass-fronted building next to the Plough. Yeah, and it sold bridal gowns for years. That one. That was a community bookshop. It was heavy on sort of punk and reggae and anarchy and that sort of thing. And that was the perfect place for what was something like a housing action group to meet. And somebody mentioned that there was a street in Norwich where half of the houses were unoccupied and that it was owned by the council. And we agreed on the first Friday, I think the 8th of December in 1979, to break into the empty houses and to squat them. And by having 3 meetings and kind of coordinating and agreeing to do it on a Friday night so that we had the whole weekend with the City Hall being shut, the idea was that by Monday morning, when they found out what had happened, we'd already be in there. There'd be food on the table, there'd be letters on the doormat, and we'd be living and having furnished our homes. And that's pretty much what we did. After about a week of talking to the council, we agreed to have spokespeople go and talk at City Hall to the politicians. And they negotiated with us that if we formed a housing co-op, they would give us a licence to occupy for £1 per house per week plus rates. Rates were the council tax of the day. And that pretty much is what happened. And one by one, as they moved other tenants out of these empty houses in this beautiful old Victorian, what was called slum, and it was ready for slum clearance, one by one they moved what they called their problem neighbours out of those houses. And as each house got vacated, a family of squatters was waiting. And basically, one by one, we took over not just the first half of the street, but the whole street. We got, as I say, 60 houses under our belt in about a year. So by this time in 1980, midsummer 1980, we'd pretty much got the place all to ourselves. I think the nature of people that needed somewhere to live was such that most of us were young and we were single. Lots of us were ex-students from UEA and from City College. And as we became more established and as we'd negotiated the agreement, other people who'd lived in mainstream society and wanted to live a more alternative lifestyle came and kind of enriched the mix of people. There was a bit of tension, those of you that weren't really homeless, those of you that were playing at an alternative lifestyle versus those of us that were real tough, hardcore homeless people. You know, there was a little bit of tension, but nothing serious. I don't know how long I've been talking, but I'm very happy to take questions. In fact, have you got your hand up? Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, I've just got, it's interesting hearing about it. I've got some language students, and we've got to go sort of Nowry. We just sort of popped in to hear a bit of the music I heard.
Okay. Shall I sing a song now?
Yeah, well, that would be great.
Okay.
We've got to get the train back.
Right. Okay, well, we're all on a time limit, so I'll sing a song and then I'll take any more questions and answers. I'll just clear my larynx. I'm not a musician, this is not a performance, I'm not looking for applause. This is really just to evoke a spirit of how when we lived down the street, there were musicians, people who made a living out of playing music, and they were always sitting around, and we'd always be able to join in and sing any songs that they were playing, and they would play very well, and they would, if you like, embellish the kind of racket that you're about to hear me make. But this is what all of us could do. It was like a fun fair. There were all these different rides that you could go on. You could get drunk, you could take drugs, you could have fights, you could do anything you liked, and always one of the other rides that you could go on was that you could sing. The songs are all very easy, and I don't play them very well, and this is not a performance. I'm just trying to evoke, as I say, a spirit from the past. There's no PA. This is just being recorded by Martin, my friend, ex-flatmate and fellow workmate from Future Radio. Thanks very much for doing this, Martin. If anyone shouldn't be here and doesn't want to be on film, well, whoops, sorry. Okay. I'm going to do Knocking on Heaven's Door. Are you all right for that one? Yeah, do you want to join in?
Yeah.
Take this badge off of me. I can't wear it anymore. Nice. It's getting dark, too dark to see. And I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Yes, I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Yeah, I'm knocking on heaven's door. Mama, take these guns off of me. I can't shoot them anymore. that long dark cloud is coming over me, and I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Hey, I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. And that's it. That's the song. Okay. You're not meant to. Thank you very much.
Jam, isn't it?
That's exactly what I wanted it to be, and you've got a lovely voice. Thank you very much,
Cheers,
Chris. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming.
Oh, well, you
Wow,
best go then.
yeah.
Adios.
Safe journey. Adios, indeed. Yeah.
Goodbye. Adios.
Bye-bye.
It's nice to sit on these crates, Eamonn.
Yes,
Story about
yes,
them, didn't
yes. We are, if you don't mind me talking about you as well in this way, we are Argyle Street relics, and these are Argyle Street relics. Just down the road on King Street, what is now the waterfront, used to be the Truman Depot for the Truman Brewery, which got bought up by Watney's, and it was shut down, and it had thousands of these beer crates. And a guy called Steve Carter had a handcart, which is a proper name for a, you know, kind of guy with a handcart, Steve Carter. And he and we loaded all of the crates and we moved them all up to Argyle Street. They got smashed up for firewood. People screwed them to their walls for shelving and made toys out of them, all sorts of things. And I kept two. And so these come from, these come from another era. that's the story about the crates. And like us, they are relics and they might fall apart during this presentation. It can happen, you know. Well, I did the first 5 minutes. Shall I move on to the next bit? Because you've now heard how we got our hands on 60 houses. This day was set up to be...
You've got a question for the audience.
Oh, please. Yeah, please.
Was it purely male? Was it mixed?
Mixed.
It was, yeah. Yeah, pretty much,
And
yeah.
where did you meet?
Well, we originally met in a community bookshop on Benedict Street. And yeah, they held meetings in the evenings in a room upstairs. And the first meeting had something like 6. The second meeting, we had something like 20. And by the time the third meeting happened, it was really, what are we waiting for? We're scared. Let's stop being scared. Let's do this together. And then the actual numbers of people that lived on the street would be in the thousands because the turnovers were high. The kind of people that are marginalised by society do have quite complex, chaotic lifestyles. And so thousands of people went through the street over the 5 years. And yeah, just to kind of describe a bit of how we are, I wanted to talk for a second about how we developed a little relationship with Wensum Lodge. So Wensum Lodge is celebrating its 50th anniversary. That's what this lovely day of taking over this street is all about. And they ran art classes, and an art teacher called Gareth would sometimes not have his model turn up. So when his model turned up and he'd got a dozen painters all wanting to paint someone, he'd just walk across the road to the Argyle Street Squat and come to someone that looked relatively compos mentis and ask them if they'd go and work cash in hand as a model. You got paid £4 for a 3-hour session if you were portrait. You got paid £2.50 an hour, again all cash in hand. In the 80s, £2.50 was a lot of money for doing nude modelling. And actually your point about men and women comes into this story. We were young, we were male and female, and we saw each other naked quite a lot in Argyle Street. So sitting in front of a bunch of strangers and getting painted from all directions, 360 degrees, they would have these, what are they called, kind of exhibition days at the end of a term. And there'd be us coming down to see us getting painted in the nude by all these people and kind of comparing and contrasting what we knew about each other and how other people portrayed us. So that was just a little anecdote about how the lifestyle was. A lot of us were unemployed. A lot of us worked on the side. a lot of us did have jobs, and a lot of people went to the TOPS training opportunities scheme, the TOPS place that's now, I think, an empty building next to the rubbish dump in Mile Cross. There were lots of people learning carpentry, bricklaying, basically construction trades, and so that was the kind of the makeup of the people. And yeah, that's kind of my second story. That's sort of how we got on. Have you got any other kind of particular things you want to describe, Chrysalis?
I suppose the 52 Argyle Street.
Thank you. Yeah. That's brilliant. Thanks for saying that. So there were things on Argyle Street. One of them was number 52, which was what we called a community centre. And I think that you probably spent more time in the community centre than I did.
Probably did, actually, yes.
And when it was first set up, people like Russell would find homeless people and offer them a room in the community centre upstairs.
That's right.
On an overnight basis, waiting for one of the other houses to come free. If we knew that someone was moving on, then you would have somewhere to stay. We also had a food co-op.
That's right.
In there. I used to buy wholesale food from a wholesale greengrocers on Oak Street that's not there anymore, that's now luxury housing. Dyer's Yard it is now, but then it was a whole street greengrocers, and I used to buy sacks of spuds, onions. We had, I think, sacks of pulses and stuff like that, and for £1 a week you could just come in, help yourself. There was nobody weighing it out for you or keeping an eye on you, making sure you weren't nicking anything, and that worked for about a year. That was one of the things that we did. We also had a library in there, so basically we all put our books in there. One guy, I think, rather nice, well, idealistically, was at the TOPS course, and he said, you can all come into my house and help yourself to my tools to do any breaking in, any squatting, any furnishing, any repairs that you need to do. And I can remember about our second meeting, him saying, can I have my tools back? And the place went silent, so he had to start again. But you learn, it's a learning process. One of the other things that we had on the street, and this, I just thank you so much for mentioning the community centre. One of the other things we had was there was a shop that had been built when it was originally constructed as homes for Coleman's factory workers.
That's right.
And the shop got taken over by Norwich's Women's Centre. And the women that ran the Women's Centre were living above the shop. They were squatting this building. And they were getting a grant from Norwich City Council to do pregnancy testing and all the other things that they were doing down there.
Did they have rape crisis in there as well?
They did.
Yeah. And
they got, as I say, grants from a council whose land they were squatting. That's the kind of irony that was going on at the time. 1979 was an interesting time. We saw Greenham Common become a women's peace camp, and many of the women that lived and visited the Women's Centre became regular hardcore activists down at Greenham. And one of them was one of the women that abseiled down the side of the House of Lords and chained herself to, I think it was Sue Lawley's desk during her 9 o'clock news broadcast back in the 80s. It was another time we did things differently. And likewise, Norwich was a port at the time. And during the miners' strike, scab coal was planned to be shipped from Poland and unloaded pretty much where Wherry Avenue is now. That would have been, there were cranes that could have unloaded the scab coal. So we had striking miners coming down and hanging out with the feminists from the Women's Centre and the rest of the squatters to picket the site to stop the scab coal from ever getting unloaded. And it never did. The coal never arrived. And so some very interesting relationships formed between striking miners and ardent separatist feminists. It's funny how you find common ground in adversity. I think I'm going to sing another song now. If I haven't got any more questions for now, I'm going to tell you after the song about how we lost the 60 houses. I'm going to clear my larynx again. It's squash, by the way. It's just squash and water. I never normally sing outdoors, sober, or in public. So my heart is actually pumping away.
One question for you. What did you do for heating and power?
That's a really interesting question. You wouldn't have thought so. First thing that happened when we moved in was you went to the electricity showroom, which is now HMV on Gentleman's Walk, and you got your electricity on. This is at first. And then you went up to St Stephen's to roughly the entry to Chapelfield Shopping Mall to the gas showroom, and you got your gas put on, same as everybody else in Norwich. When both the gas and electricity boards noticed that they were connecting loads of people in the same address, they put two and two together, asked some questions, and demanded that we give them a £60 deposit for electricity and an £80 deposit for gas. And a woman who was just about to go to Israel to live on a kibbutz used all of her savings to pay for all of our deposits. Isn't that amazing? And we got on the front page of what was then the Norwich Mercury, I think it was, Norwich Mercury and Advertiser, because the gas board turned up with police and trucks to disconnect all of the houses from the street, to disconnect the gas main from the road up to our houses. And we threw ourselves in front of them and stopped them from doing it. And that's when Jean ponied up all of the money and sent them all home. So thanks very much for asking what could have been a really mundane question. But please, more of these, because it's all up here. You just have to get it out.
I don't think all the houses were connected though, were they?
Well, we did do a lot of imaginative sharing of electricity particularly, and some of that even involved streetlights. And this was kind of happening more towards the end, I think, than in the very beginning. But yeah, that's yeah.
I certainly remember struggling to find my way around in 147, for example, with candles. And
yes, good
could be
point.
A bit scary.
Lots of us did not have the money, and when we didn't have the money, we would be without power, so we used candles, and lots of us used paraffin heaters. I don't think paraffin heaters are even legal anymore. The combination of young people, you know, kind of having a permanent party and playing with, hiya, good to see you, playing with all these flammable substances. Yeah.
Isn't that how 52 got burnt down in the end?
I don't know that for certain, but I didn't know that it did get burnt down,
I believe
actually.
it did.
Okay,
I believe it did,
I
yeah.
forgot that bit.
But in the latter days.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
Anyway, you said you were going to sing another song, was that?
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that.
I think I'll rock my own flap.
Yeah. There's water here if you prefer,
That's excellent.
but you can share my bodily fluids. They're on the neck of the bottle. We have never met before.
Oh, I haven't.
No. Although we both lived in the same street at the same time, basically we've communicated over the Facebook page. And yeah.
Virtual relationship, hasn't it?
Yeah, up until now. This song sounds an awful lot like the last song. They all sound very much like each other. Again, that's the point. This is not a performance. I am not the musician. So I'll shut my eyes, and if you're all gone when I open them again, I won't be surprised. Right, yeah. This is Friend of the Devil. Do you know this one?
No, I don't think it was there when that
Okay.
particular one was.
Okay. It's a Grateful Dead song.
Oh,
It's a bit faster than the other one.
right. Yes.
It'll hopefully finish quicker.
Possibly, yeah.
It's got one more chord. Right. And go. I lit up from Reno, I was trailed by 40 hounds. Didn't get to sleep last night till the morning came around. I set off running and I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, I just might get some sleep tonight. I ran back to the devil and he loaned me 20 bills. Spent the night in Utah in a place up in the hills. I set out running and I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, I just might get some sleep tonight. Got 2 reasons why I lie awake each lonely night. The first one's named Sweet Anne Marie. She's my heart's delight. The second one is Prison Babe. The sheriff's on my tail, and if he catches up with me, I'll spend my life in jail. Got a wife in Chino, I got one in Cherokee. The first one's named Sweet Anne Marie. It says she's got my child, but it don't look a thing like me. I set out running and I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, I just might get some sleep tonight. And there
were some nights when none of us slept, weren't there, really?
Indeed. They're all songs that have roughly the same chords, and they all have gaps in them, and you can always come back to the beginning and all that sort of stuff. And proper musicians were sitting around in the play area at the top of the street, armed with guitars and harmonicas and what have you, and there was permanently music being played, and you could just take your guitar from your home and walk up to the green and sit up with them and do that. And there'd usually be a game of football and kids on the swings, and yeah, it was, as I say, it was like a fun fair with free rides, and whatever you wanted to go on, you'd find it there.
We've exhausted our attention span.
Well, I think you've been brilliant. Thank you very much for getting through, and the bubbles were lovely.
Oh,
I appreciated the bubbles, yeah? They were nice.
Yes, I like the bubbles.
You added to the carnival spirit.
You certainly did.
I think the romanticisation of history is a very natural thing to do, especially when the people that lived through it are still alive, and you do have a responsibility not to, you know, say anything ill of the people that you lived with and shared so much with and fought with, and people that have died and all that sort of stuff. But the final bit of this is going to be about how we lost the 60 houses. You don't lose 60 houses without pain. You don't lose it without fighting. You know? You don't lose it without blaming people. And we didn't lose it without blaming each other. After 3 years, the council's licence with us ran out. By the time those 3 years were up, we could possibly have renewed that licence. We applied and got a £1 million grant from the Department of Environment to actually buy the street off the council and do it up. And we formed a builders co-op to actually do the work ourselves. And we were going to pay ourselves £6 an hour to do the building work. Remember, nude modelling was £2.50 an hour, yeah? £6 an hour. That was the way that we costed things. We were the co-op. We were the system. We were the man. We were the heat. We were telling other people what to do. There were loads of people who did not join the co-op, who did not sign licence agreements, who would not pay a £1 a week licence fee to the council. So our arrears were growing. Some of, if you like, the more settled people in the street were still paying their bills and living next door to people who were insulting them for paying their bills and making their arrears get bigger, and that led to tension. If we could have presented a united front, we may have got to the next level, which would have been buying the street, doing it up, and becoming property owners. The bourgeoisie, the very people we'd, you know, been marginalised by, hated, escaped from, and lived an alternative to. It could have happened, but it didn't. What I said to you before about taking the Labour Council, taking the Tory government to the House of Lords over the compulsory sale of council house legislation kicks back in now. Michael Heseltine, if you remember him, was the Secretary of State for Environment when this happened. And he said to his civil servants, pretty much, anything that happens with housing in Norwich, you stick it on my desk. I want to know. And when we got that £1 million grant, he said to them, find a way of pulling the plug on that £1 million grant. And they did. They said public money had been spent twice on Argyle Street, which it had. Argyle Street had been bought by the council with your taxes. Argyle Street was going to be paid for by your taxes again to be bought off the council by the squatters, the licensees, us, the co-op. Public money is spent twice in other housing schemes, and it has been all over the country. In those days, it happened, but it wasn't meant to be. I'm going to take another swig because I'm drying up. Once that £1 million was gone, the council had no interest in us. Quite rightly, that's your taxes they're looking after. We got into arrears. We got into arguments with each other over the best way to hang on and live in Argyle Street. And when the council pulled the plug, the kind of people that had got jobs, and by now we were breeding like rabbits, the people that had got kids had got priorities, yeah? And they needed more stability than those of us who basically had less commitment to Argyle Street and more commitment to other things, basically, mostly being responsible parents. And housing legislation says that the council must provide housing, particularly for parents of young children that are threatened with eviction, especially by their own council. So one by one, if you like, the more stable people in the mix were being rehoused all over the city, and they were being replaced by people that weren't going to be eligible for anything from the council, and they mainly were men. That's how it kind of got. Young men are the kind of, quite rightly, I'm not being whatever about this, I'm not being right on about this or something. Young men are the most able to look after themselves, and so they are at the very end of the queue. Back in the 80s, again, under Thatcher, you've got the miners' strikes, you've got all the other stuff that's going on, and mass unemployment. Young men were pretty unwanted and pretty angry about it, and the street really did dilapidate. The fabric of the buildings was no longer being looked after. The amount of substance misuse kind of pretty much rocketed, and you can't do illegal substance misuse without dealing. So the amount of people that were coming in and going out was, it was higher. People were coming down to score and just use us. The police took over one of the flats in Normandy Tower where I now live and filmed everything that was going on there. It was a very easy way for them to run an open prison pretty much some of the time. The dogs started hanging around in packs. Broken glass and syringes littered the street. I'm describing now the kind of opposite of today. Today is a lovely sunny day with a beautiful breeze, and most of my memories of Argyle Street are a bit like this. But there's also a kind of memory of this place that was dark and raining and noisy. And as you said, we maybe had to be up early in the morning but couldn't get any sleep. It became something that had gone too far, and it had to stop.
Reflection of society at the time, though, really.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people on the road too, weren't there? The
Yeah.
travellers brought a lot of that into Argyle Street, and the convoy too.
Yeah.
Because it ended up being vehicles jammed from one side of it to the other.
It's true. One of the things that we did when we first moved in was we pretty much took down all of the garden fences, and the children played everywhere. There were toys. If you look at photographs of Argyle Street on the Facebook page, the place is littered with toys. And I never noticed this at the time, toys, bicycles, you name it. It was like that. And by the time the peace convoy started turning up, they had trucks, they lived in trucks, but they had somewhere to park, or park up, as they always say. I don't know where that up comes in, but yeah, you never park a truck, you always park it up. And so there was just a line of trucks. And that kind of, having removed all the fences, this great big steel barrier, and I don't begrudge any of them for doing it. As you say, it was a reflection of where society had got to at that point. It was much more confrontational and much simpler, therefore, because it was a more confrontational world. You knew who you hated and you knew who you loved, and there was nothing in between. It's all got so much more. There are so many more grey areas these days. But I don't know really where to go with this. It basically, in my opinion, Argyle Street had got to a point where it could no longer survive. and we lost the whole street through demolition. And the police turned up, well, they outnumbered us about 2 to 1, and we were far too rattled with bitterness and substance misuse to have actually provided any resistance. The media outnumbered the police 3 to 1, and you will see photographs of Argyle Street, one particular photograph of a guy in a German helmet, in a leather jacket, holding a cudgel and kicking a car. He actually owned that car, but it's an amazing image, and it was clearly well taken. It was well posed. It was, and it's the image that people hold of the street. It's what our badge is almost
That's
now.
a shame,
Which
there was so many other things, though,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
For so many other
Yeah.
people of all walks of life.
yeah,
All walks of life.
yeah,
You know?
it was. And one of the lovely things I think about Norwich is that we have, for example, the second highest cathedral in the country. We have the oldest bridge parapets in Europe. We got the supporting actor from Alan Partridge to come and switch on our Christmas lights last year. We do kind of second really well, and I think I'm not taking the mickey out of us at all for that. I think we really understand that being the best is a bore sometimes, you know? And being second best is much, much nicer. We say that Argyle Street was the largest squat in Europe. No, it wasn't. I went to London and Manchester. There were tons more trucks, tons more guns, and, you know, sort of drugs and syringes and crime. Massive squats. Christiania, you know. We called ourselves the largest squat in Europe, and we weren't. But I think that we were the warmest, sunniest, funniest squat in the world ever. And I'll stop there, and should we sing together?
Yes.
Oh,
why
sorry,
not?
any more questions before we close this off? No. See,
No.
Well,
Have we covered everything?
Have you met up with other people in the future? I mean, you two said you've never met before.
actually,
You both live in Norwich.
yeah.
Well, I was in Scotland from 1986 onwards. I only came back 2 years ago, so you know, certain tragic circumstances have brought people together, haven't they? There've been funerals.
Yeah, funerals are
Particularly Gary
are
was
a
one, wasn't
really
it?
amazing events. You know?
So yeah, people do come together for that.
Yeah.
They certainly do. Yeah.
Yeah, and Argyle Street funerals are pretty notable. It doesn't matter what time of the morning they are, people are turning up with tins of special brew and goodness knows what. You know, I'd leave it for a minute if I was you. You have to say to the next kind of grieving mourning people because it reeks in there. And we go to big pubs with big gardens, and they don't know what's going to hit them. No one tells them we're coming. Yeah. So those are reunions. One thing that the Argyle Street Facebook page also led to was a lovely woman from London suggested that we have an actual reunion on Argyle Street now. So Argyle Street itself, at the moment, half of it is council housing or privatised council housing. The other half of the housing is all fenced off through subsidence. Very strangely, in our defence, we did say, you don't want to build anything here in Argyle Street because you'll just get subsidence.
Especially on one side of the street.
The council's rather sober response was, well, that's why we need to get you out of there. You know, oh, duh! You think you know everything. And of course, actually what's happened is they said in their defence, we're going to float the housing that's there on concrete rafts, so there won't be any subsidence. But there was. This was new technology at the time. They've since learned that what Argyle Street was originally was chalk. There wasn't housing, and so it's all been scooped away. If you look at old pictures, Cotman painted the port of Norwich, and you can see that there was a cliff coming down to the sea, and now it's a hill, kind of, with a gradient running up. All of that chalk was taken out and put between the flints that make up the city wall, and so you've got this kind of yoghurt that you can build light, jerry-built Victorian terraces on, but you can't build modern chunky luxury housing to anywhere near the same extent. And you have to get a JCB and rack the concrete rafts into the yoghurt before you put houses on them. So half of the houses are ripe for squatting, but squatting is now criminal. So you couldn't form a housing co-op. You couldn't negotiate with the council. You'd be a criminal and there'd be no negotiation, you'd be out. At the very end of the street, the play area is somewhere that we have had 3 reunions. And the first one was amazing. We were all sort of standing around, kind of not quite sure how to sort of talk to one another. It was all very nervous and, you know, kind of count the wrinkles and see who's still alive. And I loved its nervousness, its almost embarrassment. It was a very, very vivid memory. By the time the second and third ones took place, it just looked to me like a bunch of oafs drinking and urinating lager in a children's play area. And I feel such a snob for saying that, you know. But
that's why you're still here,
I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't go to a 4th one. It's a bit like Terminator, you know, kind of stop after 3, please. Speaking of which, oh, lovely, please do. No, these questions are the best bits, because I've forgotten everything, and you remind me. Oh, yeah!
Yeah, there's video. There is video.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, there is
Yes.
video. Yeah.
There's a woman called Doris Lessing, an old communist, and she wrote something called The Golden Notebook. Another one that she wrote, which was a kind of sci-fi job, was called Memoirs of a Survivor.
That was good work, that was.
It started, yes, we got, sorry, some of us, did you?
Oh, yes.
We are talking to a star of Memoirs of a Survivor.
I think my bits ended up on the cutting room floor, but they still paid me for it, so...
Yeah.
All right.
If I say that the sex scenes were the best bit of that film, that tells you just how bad the film
Very
is
weird
to
film.
watch.
Has anyone ever
It is
seen it?
real
Very
rubbish.
strange
It's
film.
got Julie Christie, is it Nigel Hawthorne?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly Julie Christie's in it, yes.
And Argyle Street, the squat, was chosen as a location to resemble a sort of post-apocalyptic suburb of London.
Yes.
It did it really well.
There was a poster on the bottom of Normandy Towers, and it said, "Looters will be shot."
Yeah. Which kind
They
of...
really set the atmosphere, didn't they? I think, in a way, they were kind of sort of seeing into
absorbing.
the
They were
future,
absorbing.
Really. They were seeing what was going to come, you know.
Yes, yes.
Only be air guns.
And again, I
Anyway.
think if you go on the Argyle Street Facebook page, there's a link to the film. I've got a copy of it, and I lend it out all the time. If you live nearby and we meet up again, I'll give it to you.
There was also
In
one
fact, tell you
shot by
what.
Al Stokes on the last day as well. There's 2 or 3 films, isn't there? There's also one, there's one by Al Stokes that was shot on the last day. Well, the last few days.
I'll lend you my copy. Yeah. Not at all. Not at all.
It looks a bit like a bomb site, though, you know, because the demolition is in place, you know, and there's sort of sporadic fires breaking out.
Hello.
everywhere.
Good to see you. Yeah. See you
There was
later.
also a music video shot
Aye, aye.
by a band for the Farmers Boys,
Mm.
and they used part of Argyle Street for their set too. So you get a flavour of mid
Yes.
1980s knowledge as well as Argyle Street. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So there you are.
And a band called Popular Voice.
Yes, I remember seeing
they
that.
did a video in Argyle Street.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, with real squatters
Yep.
in
Yes.
the background, and they're sort of walking up the street, trying to look like, you know, hey, we, you know, squatters. woo.
Yeah, that's right. They've just gone down to the score, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, they did a lot more than that as well. They had they had deep and meaningful relationships with females in the
Popular
street
Voice
as
did,
well.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, they
Oh,
did.
yeah, sticks in their
They
hair.
took our women.
Of course they did, man. You dreadful old hippie. Go on.
So, shall we finish this?
Of course.
I don't know how else to finish it. So yeah, I'll just sing this song and that's it. We're done. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, guys. Really
yeah,
appreciate
thanks
it.
again very much
You've
for
been a
that.
great audience.
Yes.
You've answered some intelligent and cogent questions.
Needed those questions badly. Yeah.
Let's hope you've got a bit more of a picture of Argyle Street.
This
If
would-
anybody really wants to know more about it, there is the Facebook group, Argyle Street Squat. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah,
It
Argyle
would have
Street.
been a much worse presentation if you hadn't asked the questions. And yeah, there's tons more where it came
We've
from.
had
So
such a smashing day for it as well.
Would you be able to see this film? Like if I wanted to ask my son to watch or something, where would we see this?
yeah, tell him to do his homework. Otherwise, he'll have to watch the Argyle Street. Argyle Street Facebook page. Martin, will we be able to get this in form? Will it go on YouTube or something? Well, look at that. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for that,
I'm going to
Martin.
get so blamed for this.
Okay, so this is a song that we didn't used to sing down Argyle Street. I think it was a new song at the time, and although it got played on stereos, Nobody got it together to learn the chords. The songs that you heard before were all sung because a bunch of old hippies and psychedelic shell-shocked acid casualties kind of brought their guitars, their chords, their memories and their songs, and we kind of sat in with them and learned their songs. And this is one that I've learned since then. And yeah, it's one that was playing all the time, and it's one that we both know.
Is it off the Exodus album? Is it off Exodus? Bob Marley's song. Go on, Eamonn.
I'm gonna have to, yeah.
On Maestro.
Got it. I'm getting it now. Well, pirates said they rob I, so died to the merchant ships. Minutes before they take I from the bottomless pit. But my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing? Songs of freedom was all I ever had. Redemption song. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but a self can free your mind. Have no fear for atomic energy. None of them can stop the tide. How long must they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We're gonna fulfill the book. Don't you help to sing? Songs of freedom was all I ever had. Redemption song. Songs of freedom. Redemption song.
Eamonn Burgess, ladies and gentlemen.
Chrysalis Wasserman. This one gets played at funerals, by the way. This one is a funeral song, yeah? I'll have it at mine.